Hello, I'm Deborah Malone, founder of The Internationalist and host of Internationalist Marketing TV. Today's guest is Martin Puris, founder and CEO of Puris&Partners and former chairman of Ammirati&Puris. Martin, what a pleasure to see you. I'm really excited to hear what you have to say about our business, and welcome to the show.
It's nice to see you. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed talking to you before, and I'm not sure everybody's going to love what I have to say about our business, but
well, look, sometimes truth hurts. So on that note,
yeah.
why don't we start by at least me acknowledging that you've obviously seen tremendous change throughout the decades in this business. But one of the things that you say now about the times now is that competition is fiercer than ever. Brand advantages are more fleeting. Customers are extremely knowledgeable, vocal, and perhaps even less loyal. You also talk about how commoditization is a real danger. So, in your opinion, what does all this mean to marketers now?
Well, I've lived through the rise and fall of marketing in this country, and I've seen what it's done to business in general, and also the advertising business, which is kind of at the whip end of corporate America. When I got into the business, which is a long time ago, advertising was as silly as it is now. It was white knights running through backyards selling soap with suds or whatever they were selling. And then along came a guy named Bill Bernbach, who did things differently and changed the business overnight. I mean, literally overnight. And that's when I got in. I think at the beginning of Bernbach's meteoric rise, although it wasn't meteoric. He was around for 15 years before he, did his famous work. But he created advertising that nobody had ever seen before. It was brilliant in all respects. It was insightful. It was human. It was compelling. And he opened the field for the rest of us to open advertising agency. Mary Wells, Carl Alley, the whole bunch of us that opened in hotel rooms. That's where you opened an agency in those days, and changed the world, literally. It also coincided with a change in American business. When I got into the business, CEOs never came out of finance. They only came out of sales and marketing. If a financial guy became CEO, you sold your stock because you knew it was about to happen. Enter Wall Street, and the obsession with quarterly earnings. Years ago, it was yearly earnings, and it was quarterly earnings. And before, say, the mid-'70s, senior executives were paid mostly salary and some bonus and some options, which were, not particularly meaningful. When Wall Street became the customer rather than the people, boards of directors said, well, if Wall Street is our customer, then we're compensating in the wrong way. And somewhere around the mid-'70s, it flipped. Went from little salary and mostly options and quarterly earnings. So you don't have to be a genius to understand where that goes. Marketing becomes less essential to your options. And let's remember that the tenure of CEOs and CMOs is, short term to say the least. So they're not interested in building companies. They're interested in making their options mean something. In that environment, marketing becomes a stepchild. It becomes irrelevant. So the birth of transactional advertising, changed the business. Plus, technology between the two of them, it changed the game. Leads us to today, where I think the estimate for this year, is somewhere upwards of $350 billion spent in media alone, not including production, not including, any of the extras. So mark that up, I don't know, 30%, 40%. doesn't make much difference. It's a lot of money. It's serious money. And it's being largely, in my opinion, it's being largely wasted on advertising that's often dull-witted, at best entertaining, but devoid of anything that remotely resembles a great story or a big idea, as we used to call it. Uh, so now I predict that a big change is coming. Um, I think corporations are starting to get restless. Uh, we're spending $1 billion in media in the United States to say what? You mean we can't say anything better than that? And careers and a lot of money are at stake. So I predict that things are going to change. Are they going to change inside agencies? I don't know. There's a huge trend, as you know, towards bringing advertising in-house. And not the first time that companies have tried that. It's never worked before, particularly for a lot of reasons. But I think the important thing is that there will be let's call it a revolution, the second creative revolution. I was in the first creative revolution and still around, so maybe I'm part of it. I'd like to think I'll start the second one.
Well, I think that might be a good thing to say as we approach the Year of the Dragon, which sounds, at least to me, somewhat auspicious for things that might be a bit fiery. But
Yeah,
you mentioned a couple of things that I find quite interesting, and I think a lot of people would agree with you. Obviously, the focus on digital and transactional. However, you also brought up something, and that is whether you call it a great story or the big idea. And perhaps that is the thread that is unifying all these times, particularly as you talked about, when advertising changed, it became more human and more compelling. You've always held that a great story is a powerful asset and a huge brand differentiator. Do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
sure. I think having a great story to tell people is as valuable an asset as any corporation can possess. And what does that mean? It means that having a great story to tell is as valuable inside as it is outside. It's a flag you march behind. It's your purpose. It's your soul. It's your promise. Without that, you're kind of roaming, and people don't exactly know what to think of you. Is a Cadillac? Let's go to the car business, which, as you know, I'm intimately familiar with. But cars are a collection of parts. That's all they are: 3,000-4,000 parts, whatever it is. Why is a BMW's parts? Why are a BMW's parts considered more valuable than a Cadillac's? Now, there's more than one reason, obviously, but BMW has a purpose. They know who they are. They've been building the same car since 50, 60 years, essentially. Different models, different whatever, but it's the same BMW. It's a driver's car, and Cadillac has a different idea. They used to have a different weekly. They came out with some new theme line. I think now it's iconic, and it should be iconic. I don't know what the hell that means, but fine. Um, and it doesn't mean that the cars are bad. Toyota is one of the great manufacturing companies in the world. They spent last year, I guess, $2 billion in the United States on media alone to leave us with the brilliant thought, let's go places. I don't know. That could be a skateboard manufacturer, a bicycle. I don't know who that is. But if I don't know, if I were the CEO of Toyota, I would say, come on, guys, we got to find something better to say about ourselves than let's go places. And it comes back to the soul of a company. When we got so what is great advertising? You mind if I define that so it's not so amorphous?
Not at all.
It took me decades to refine a list of 5 things that I use as a guide. And I think it fits all great ideas, whether it's advertising or a product or whatever. Uh, Great ideas, great advertising is first insightful, and each one of these things has a story behind it. Second, preemptive. Third, meaningful. Fourth, memorable. And last of all, compelling. We literally could talk a half an hour on each one of those points, but I I can't find a current advertising campaign that could pass any of those in their
Um,
the essence of their story. So let's go back to the story again, why that's valuable. Advertising is a direct descendant of propaganda. The rules of propaganda have always been very simple. You find one thing to say, you say it in the right way, and you say it over and over and over and over again, and it becomes accepted truth. The ultimate driving machine this year is 50 years old, half a century. Um, People recite it, people know it, people understand it, they know, and therefore they know what BMW is. Uh, it also works internally, and it also works with people you would like to bring into your company, because it is your soul, and it is your promise, and it is your your being, your essence. Uh, and great advertising and great should be intellectually convincing, but it has to be emotionally compelling. And I just don't
that's
see anything like that. I can give you a list of, I don't know, 20 great campaigns of the past off the top of my head, and to 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 contrast that with what's being done now, the work that's being done. So advertising agencies, for some reason that puzzles me, walked away from the one thing that used to make them corporate America's most valuable marketing partner. That is the creation of big ideas and important stories. That's what made them valuable. Everything else they've done end up to be commodities. You know, they ran into digital. First of all, they denied that it. First of all, they ignored it. Then they denied that it existed. Then they embraced it, like the Stockholm syndrome. And a few years back, 5 years back, 4 years back, one large international advertising group said that they were no longer in the advertising business, they're in the digital business. Jesus, my God. Digital is a media. I've been saying this for years and years and years. Digital is a media, guys. It's like every other media. It's a it's a soapbox from which you can reach people and tell them your story. It is not the end. It's only a way to reach people. You know, bus posters are a way to reach people. Television is a way to, newspapers, those are just media.
Well, you
Well,
raise a very interesting point. I think not only about advertising, advertising's greatest asset as being corporations' greatest asset, but good ads are being intellectually convincing and emotionally compelling. But I let me play devil's advocate for a moment, because I've watched in the last several years an emphasis on purpose, and I'd be curious how you might differentiate, let's call it an aspirational statement of purpose, from perhaps a unifying storyline or a big idea. I mean, perhaps they're similar, but I mean, just to give you an example, what we've seen even in the last year, we've seen companies like Google rallying behind a pivotal purpose statement, um, which is for them organize the world's information. You've got even a company like Spanx that started out with, women's undergarments, now with a statement of purpose that's called elevating women as they expand into other lines of clothing that apparently make women feel good, and so on and so forth. So how do how do you reconcile those two, or is it just semantics? Are they similar, or is this something that at least is good in your estimation in terms of the way people are thinking about advertising and marketing?
well, they can overlap, and there can be a common story there. But the examples that you've given me are more corporate than consumer. Um, they're corporate statements. They really don't say much to me. And words are magic. Words mean something. So once you have your essential story, well, let me give you an example. Let's go back to BMW. The essential story of BMW was, and still is, the only thing that makes an expensive car worth the money is extraordinary performance. Um, the ultimate driving machine is the expression of that. But I would say, I propose that it's both intellectually convincing, but it's also emotionally compelling in those words. And sometimes it's hard to put your finger on exactly why, but obviously it's been around for 50 years and people know it and like it, so it has meaning. Corporate statements and missions, the mission statements, which you put on marble walls and everybody walks by every morning and chuckles, aren't about the consumer. The basis of all advertising, I can sum up the advertising in one simple sentence. And that is, what is the one thing I could say to you that if I said it would make you want to buy one? That's advertising.
Yeah, no, you raise an important issue about the consumer, and I think that certainly in a post-COVID world, you did talk about internal and external rallying with people. I think that there is this feeling that we have to rally our people inside, we have to communicate it outside. Should it be the same thing? I think there are rumblings about people wanting to get this right. My question to you is then, what is the best way to go about unearthing a story that's worth telling, that's compelling to consumers and rallies a staff behind something and defines a product, and that product lives up to that statement as well?
Yeah, well, it has to come from the product. I mean, you make a good point. The only thing that good advertising can do for a bad product is put it out of business faster. Yeah, it has to come from the product, but sometimes the product doesn't know what its essential story is, and you have to unearth it. So as a writer, and you know this, it's digging, it's work. It's digging, it's work, it's getting to know the people that are producing the product and what they think and what they're doing and where they came from. That's just, again, going back to BMW. We pitched against Ted Bates and Benton and Bowles at the time, came down to the three of us, and Ralph and I didn't have any business. So going in, we looked like the underdog. Those two agencies spent most of their time with the marketing people in Germany. We spent almost no time with the marketing people in Germany. We spent all our time with the engineers. And when it came to the final presentation, first of all, they were embarrassed about the way the car looked. It looked like an old Corvair in 1975, 74, but it cost the same as a Lincoln or a Cadillac. So Americans looked at that and said, you got to be kidding. So clearly it needed to be redefined. But they were ashamed of showing the car. Our first ad, we held up the ultimate driving machine. We literally got a standing ovation from the 20 people that we were presenting to. Why? Because we understood them, and they finally realized that somebody understood them. It took work to find it, and sometimes it takes a lot of work. When we got an account back then, the client would say, well, when can we see the first campaign? And the answer was, when we're ready. It was, well, what does that mean? Well, it means it could be 2 weeks, or it could be 2 months, or it could be 3 months, but we're not going to show you anything until we're ready, until we've actually found the story that we want to tell. Everybody loves BMW, so do I, but Club Med was actually the campaign that, I don't know if I'd say most proud of, but it was the most intellectually challenging. The only reason we took the account is because one of our senior people loved Club Med. I said, I don't think we want this product. They had a great beach, and they didn't deliver anything that American tourists wanted. There were no better rooms, no TV, no money, no. They changed the sheets maybe once a day, or sometimes clean towels. Great beaches, great sort of camaraderie in these villages. And anyway, we were convinced to take it. And so now we have to present a campaign, and all research says there's nothing in this product that Americans want. And it was literally like, a week now, and we got to do something. And at 11 o'clock at night, I remember so clearly, we were in the office, and a light bulb went off in my head. And I came out and I said, I've got it. I totally get this. Why is it that you need 2 weeks away from the other 50 weeks? Because of all this crap, television and newspapers and money and better rooms and better tables. It's genius. They've created the antidote for civilization. At any rate, it was just, I don't even know how it, as a writer, you push as much information as you can into your head. And it's also a great way to avoid writing. I need more research. The blank page is intimidating.
But are you saying then that it is possible to come up
Yeah,
with these great stories now? Or
yes,
is
of
that,
course it
or
is.
are people not, or do you think marketers feel that the business is so complex and they've got so many things on their plate, from worrying about everything from
Well, they
climate
ought to be
issues?
worrying more about the story they have to tell. That ought to be number one on their KPI list.
Is someone at fault? Is
Yeah,
the agency at fault? Is the marketer at fault?
both,
Is
both.
our, have our times changed so that we're so distracted?
If people aren't interested in what you're saying, they have short attention spans. If they're interested, they have long attention spans. It's all in what you're telling them. And it doesn't make any difference where you say it, whether it's digital or newspapers or television. It doesn't make any difference. If you have nothing to say, it still amounts to nothing. So all these excuses are just excuses for doing the hard work and the talent. There's a hard work will get you about 80% there, and then there's magic in writing, and advertising will always be part science and part art form. And to try and reduce it to predictable technology, even if it's AI, it's not going to work. And I think, why did it happen? I think what we talked about earlier, what changed in corporate America, the pursuit of Wall Street as opposed to customers. On maybe the most harmful sentence ever written was maximize shareholder value. Uh, Apple, I don't know if they still do. So who's doing it right? Apple. Now, let's also, so this is another one of my, themes. Your product isn't just the thing you make; it's everything that surrounds the thing you make. It's where I buy it. It's what package it comes in. It's if I want to return it, is it easy? Is it hard? All of that stuff, and you can name more, is your product. Everything. There's no there's no unimportant detail in that mix. And Steve Jobs, who we worked with for 2.5 years at his biggest failure, next computer systems. And I love Steve. Uh, he understood what I'm saying completely. I think that's why we ended up working together, because everything to Steve was important. If he somebody showed him a product that was in production and there's something he didn't like about it, he would stop production until they got it right for him, so that he felt it was perfect. You go into the Apple store and you got these great young kids in the blue shirts, and they're smart and they know what they're talking about and they can help you. When you look at all these old ideas, you have to put them into context. So when you look at well, I don't know, go back to Clairol, does she or doesn't she? Only her hairdresser knows for sure. To really understand the power of that line, you got to understand the time it was written, and it was a revolutionary. Hookers bleached their hair. you know, they redefined the whole, more than just the hair coloring business. They redefined and came along with the women's revolution. You've come a long way, baby. The Virginia Slims campaign became like the theme song for, it could have been done wrong. It could have been done trying to cash in and self-serving, but they were brilliant in their execution. And if you look at the commercials today, which I did, but I didn't look at them today, but about 2 weeks ago, because I was curious whether the execution, those commercials, they could run today. Absolutely brilliant. It was a long time ago. Yellow Pages, let your fingers do the walking. New York Times, all the news is fit to print. I mean, you go back and I literally could recite 20 off the top of my head. And there were more. They were great campaigns. They were great ideas. First comes the idea, then comes the execution. And a great campaign is both. It's not one or the other. But if I had to settle, I'd settle for the great idea and a mediocre execution. I mean, Anderson windows, window replacement. I hate the execution. It's so pat.
You mentioned something that makes a lot of sense, and that is the connection with culture. And it makes me concerned that is there something about our culture now that doesn't enable us to have these stirring and wonderfully emotional brand stories, or are we just
I don't think so. I think we're kidding ourselves, or they're kidding themselves. People are the same as they were. They will respond to things that interest them. If I'm not interested in what you're saying, I don't care how long you say it or how beautifully you film it, I'm still not interested. But if you tell me something important, something that I'm interested in, then I will listen. Of course I will listen. Why wouldn't I listen? And the idea that, short of all kinds of excuses, digital world, transactional, it's just all it's just all BS. People are the same.
Oh, interesting. Now, so let me ask you, since we are still somewhat at the beginning of a new year, um, what would you wish would be different in marketing? What would you do to change the world of advertising and marketing?
Well, I think it's going to happen. I think it's going to happen, and I'm convinced it is, because billions, hundreds of billions of dollars are being wasted. I don't know too many corporations that would give somebody a check for $2 billion and tear it up and throw it out the window. Speaking of transactional, I would like to get something for that $2 billion. And we donated the whole of the Ammirati&Puris catalog to St. John's University a few months ago, and actually it was an interesting experience because some of the work I don't even remember, and we had to gather it from various places, including some of the people that created it. In the one show, who did a retrospect from all over the place, but some of it I'd forgotten even that we had some of the clients I saw. But I had a chance because of that donation, and they're creating a course from it. It's not that it's going to sit in the basement somewhere. And that's the reason we ended up at St. John's, other than the fact that I just like their whole approach to education. And we talked to other universities, and I had a feeling all the work was going to end up in a dusty basement with everybody else's stuff. And so we never did anything. But I've had a chance to talk to the kids. And what I've told the kids, and I absolutely believe this, and because in a way I lived it, when I got into the advertising business, the great creative revolution, which is what we call it now, was in its infancy. And it changed the world of advertising, and people made a lot of money. Before the invention of the investment banker, advertising was a relatively high-paid business. What I tell the kids is another revolution is going to happen. This is a once-in-a-generation opportunity for you. It will happen because careers and money is at stake on the client side. Clients are now starting to get restless and saying, I think, maybe what we're doing isn't really too smart. Same thing that happened when I got into the business. The clients that were doing white nights running through backyards said, I don't know. What is this Volkswagen, stuff? What is this Avis campaign? We have to try harder. Maybe we should have some of that. And they left big agencies to go to small agencies to get that work because it worked. It worked. It actually worked. I can't believe that much of this stuff is working. And I think that a revolution will happen. And for the kids who are now in school or just out of school getting into the business, it's a once in a generation opportunity. You have to understand what made the advertising great when it was great. And when it was great, it was very great. You have to look at it, study it, find for yourself the context that it appeared in. So what they said, why they said it, you're going to have to do some work. But once you get it, you'll get it, you'll have it. And I think the future is going to belong to people who get it. It was Steve Jobs. If you, the worst thing he could say about a human being was he just doesn't get it. It's like you might as well leave the room. So people who get it and are also good enough to make it happen. That's it's, but it is going to happen, and that's what I tell them. And they're, by the way, they're very responsive, and I followed up on some of these kids. They are doing what I suggested. They're putting in the time and they're putting in the effort. You know, when somebody once asked Hemingway, "How do I become a great writer?" his answer was read. That's really what I'm saying. Go back, read the classics, figure out why they worked and what they said in their own time, and start practicing it. Because I wish I had, if I had an agency, I would love to march into some of these clients and say, "You're actually spending money to say this. Is that really the best you have to say?" You know, again, going back to Steve Jobs, who hated research, by the way. You couldn't drag him into research. And his answer was, wait a minute, if we don't know more than 15 people sitting in a shopping mall in St. Louis, we shouldn't be in business. My first of that list of 5 was insightful research. We're data mad. Data is, the problem with data is that it only is a snapshot of where you are. It doesn't tell you where people are going to be next week or next month. That's intuition. So you've got to, I'm a data junkie, by the way. I can't get too much information, but then intuition comes in and said, well, you know, this data is right, but I think something else is happening, which is exactly what BMW was. Had we read the data and just ended with that, it would have said our customer was, you know, cigar smoking fat guys in country clubs and, you know, bars, because that's what the data would have told, and that's what the data told us. But we felt intuitively that something was going on in the world, and we called it affluent activists. The New York Times gave us credit for creating the yuppie. We actually didn't call them yuppies. We called them affluent activists, but that was the yuppies were the young people, the beginning of physical fitness, you know, eating right, whole different perspective on life. And we said to BMW, a Lincoln or a Cadillac doesn't look like any of these people. There is no expensive car that looks like them. You make it, but they just don't know you make it. And so that was the basis of the campaign. But in the process of doing that, we redefined the entire luxury market. Because Cadillac and Lincoln were the luxury. It's what the luxury car was. Big fins, chrome, you know, but bullshit cars, wallowing down highways. So that's an example. Was it preemptive? No luxury car maker had ever said that driving machine. That was like, oh, it was a driving machine. Was it meaningful? Obviously it was. And was it memorable? Obviously it is. And was it compelling? They were selling 11,500 cars here when we got the account. And we had an advertising budget of $750,000. You know?
Well, I think that I think that what you've done with St. John's is just amazing, amazing.
Well, I
In
love those
terms of
kids. You know
shaping.
why? They're not privileged kids for the most part. They know why they're in school and they're deadly serious. They're there to get ahead.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to offer them anything.
Well, I certainly hope that what you've given them with the archives, you know, will indeed inspire them. And as we talk about revolutions, I certainly hope that you're also a part of the second revolution. And on that note, I think we'll have to return and find out how it goes, and also maybe run through some of those 5 points again. And maybe we'll even do that in some of the Super Bowl ads. So we will see. Okay.
Well, this is Truman Capote, and I'm gonna have to leave town.
No, I don't think so. But you bring up some amazing points, and I know you're not trying to be simply nostalgic, and that you are trying to help shape um, some of the young people of the future. So I think
Yeah,
that.
it's not nostalgia at all. I just have nothing to refer to in the present. If you or anybody listening to this can find me a great current campaign, I would really like to have it, because my wife keeps saying, "Oh, you can't talk about those campaigns. They're old. What about new?" And I said, "Well, find me one. Name one."
All right. Well, that will be the challenge then. We will have some, and I might even bring some examples to you. So we will see. Okay. So
Yeah,
we'll call it. We're continuing this as we move into the next revolution.
delighted.
Thank you so much, Martin. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Me too.
The Internationalist focuses on the continual reinvention of marketing by highlighting inspirational marketers around the world and their ideas as they move the industry forward. Internationalist Marketing TV shares these perspectives through interviews and personal stories. Thanks so much for watching. If you find this kind of content helpful, please click like or subscribe. Again, thanks so much.